Hej och välkomna! Nu är vi inne i avsnitt 2 redan av våran lilla videopodd. Då ska vi träffa en amerikansk fotograf.
Vi ska hälsa Micheal Grecco välkommen hit.
Precis, och hans punkbilder här nu som vi visar på The Photo Gallery här i vår.
Stor framgång har han gjort i USA och det är Europaturné som gäller. Vi är först här att visa bilderna från boken.
Boken heter då Punk, Post-Punk, New Wave och utställningen heter Days of Punk.
Exakt, och det finns oerhört många bra bilder i den som dras tillbaka till den musiktiden.
Billy Idol, Johnny Russell,
faktiskt att lyssna på
Clash.
Och höra på vad han säger lite sådär.
Ja, det ska bli jätteroligt. Han är ju inte bara punk-rock-fotograf utan han är ju en stor kändisfotograf i USA.
Stor väletablerad fotograf. Så att vi säger väl hej till honom.
Ja, vi säger hej och välkommen Micheal.
We know that you split your living between LA and New York, so where are you now?
I'm in Los Angeles. I live in Santa Monica. During the pandemic, we actually closed up our apartment in New York. So we've been here for a long time.
I see.
What seems like a long time.
Oh, it's the same all over the world, I'm afraid of.
But it's nice to be in LA, I guess. In Santa Monica, you have nice weather.
It's a good place to be. The weather's amazing. It's 80 degrees today.
We don't want to know that because we are freezing here. It's snow.
The only time I've been to Sweden was in January. It was a crime.
Yeah, then you understand us.
Yes, it's sort of the same.
It wasn't that cold, but it was really dark all day.
So we have your beautiful punk pictures in our exhibition and at the Photo Gallery in Halmstad. But can you tell us about your Days of Punk? You sort of found yourself in this culture from a conservative Italian home to a more free spirit culture. Was this why and when you started to photograph?
Yeah, I mean, I was always into music as a kid. Music was like my expression. Even though I didn't play an instrument, I was just very into music and some bands that were the roots of the punk scene, like the Velvet Underground and David Bowie and Iggy Pop. But when I went to Boston, having grown up really being a jazz listener, when I went to Boston, I started getting into the club scene the punk club scene in Boston. And it was exciting. And at the same time, I was a photojournalist for the Associated Press. I had studied photojournalism. I was interning at the Associated Press. So during the day, I would go out and photograph the governor in a press conference or something for the Associated Press that was newsworthy. And at night, I'd be a club kid. I was selling cocaine and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was like, it was. I was shooting, my favorite bands and hanging out with the bands and being up all night, and then during the day I'd go and I'd shoot some assignment for the Associated Press, and that was my life for many years until I got a job at the Boston Herald, and I sort of gave up the sex, drugs, and rock and roll and the club scene life. So the majority of the work in punk, post-punk, new wave, on stage, backstage, in your face, was shot between 78 and 83, 84. But there are obviously some few additional pictures that take us in the book to 1991.
It's so nice if you talk about some stories behind, the best band playing, what's happening, and so on.
David Fahey is a friend of mine, told me a long time ago that, you need to make the book about you, and you're sort of selling you, right? It's about you and who you are in your life. So I made it personal. I wasn't afraid to make it personal. There are a couple of pictures of me in there, and I wrote it for each venue. The images are organized by the venue. Okay. And for each venue, I wrote a little story about my experiences in that venue and my life at the time. And we tried to make, even though it's a fine art collection of photographs, we try to make it personal.
Mm-hmm. It is very personal. I think that your punk photos are something special, very different what I have seen before. How come you decided to show them now and not a long time ago?
I thought about if they were in my portfolio, would I have gotten more assignments from magazines like Rolling Stone? And I moved to Los Angeles at the invitation of People magazine. They asked me to move and work for them regularly. They basically offered me what would be the equivalent of a full-time job. So I had 2 or 3 assignments a week. It was regular. So it gave me a reason to leave the Boston Herald and move to Los Angeles. And my goal was to get out of photojournalism and get into celebrity portraiture. I was very inspired by Annie Leibovitz in the 80s. And, the goal was to move into conceptual portraiture. And because of that, I didn't want to show that sort of work. I wanted work with higher production values, and I wanted to leave photojournalism. In hindsight, it would have been an interesting project to show people. But the reality is it sat in my file cabinet for 40 years until, my archivist kept saying, you have to do something with this work. You have to do something with this work. You have to. And we kept pulling it out, and it kept getting better and better. When we did the book with Abrams, we were switching out pictures right at the last moment before the layout and the proofs had to go to the printer. So we really did a lot of research and pulled a lot of pictures. So
yeah, but sometimes it's better to wait.
That's what David Fahey has told me. It's like wine; it ages well.
Yes, that's perfect. But about the punk culture, subculture has in common that you should be allowed to do what you want as long as you don't not harm anyone else, and no racism and equal rights and sort of that stuff. Do you experience the same with punk of your days of punk?
Yeah, it was a very freely expressed time. It was a time for people to dress the way they wanted to and really do, whatever they wanted. As far as presenting themselves, there was definitely a mixture of people, gay, straight, different races. It was a culture of misfits almost, it was a culture of people who wanted to be different. So it gave you, it really gave you a sense of freedom.
Yeah.
I can really understand that. It's a very controversial where punk actually started. And I know that the Scandinavians was inspired most for the fashion from punk from London. Did you experience punk differently between America and England?
Well, I mean, I lived it. So, I mean, I think that the Ramones started punk because, they put out these crazy albums, Beat on the Brat, Beat on the Brat, Beat on the Brat with a baseball bat in the early 70s. And from what I've heard, when they played England, even though the Sex Pistols had just started up and the Clash had just started up, that, they were trying to get through a bathroom window into the club that was sold out to see the Ramones. So, I believe it was Iggy Pop and the Ramones, and it started in the U.S., but obviously England had a great influence. And for me, I happened to shoot a lot of British bands because I was living in Boston at the time. And that was the point of entry into the United States. It was the closer flight from England. And it was a warm up before people played New York and played, to record companies and things like that would be at the shows in New York.
About the fine art photography, I know that you have a personal interest for fine art. Do you have any favorite photographers that you have been inspired by? You mentioned Annie Leibovitz, and do you have any others that you really have been inspired by?
Oh yeah, I mean, I grew up. I learned the darkroom as a kid in summer camp, but then I grew up like as a kid going to the library and taking out on a long-term loan, i.e. stealing the Time Life collection books in the early 70s, which were filled with Avedon and Penn and Hero and Helmut Newton, and and that's my inspiration. That's always been my inspiration. In 75 or 76, I was at one of the earliest shows at the International Center of Photography when it was up in the Upper East Side, when they had that townhouse. Mm-hmm. And there was an Avedon show there that just blew my mind.
Mm-hmm. Nowadays, you are most famous for your conceptual photos. And I know that subcultures always have a special place with you. Do you have any new exhibition for us?
Not you're the first exhibition, and it's still up. So
we're longing for more.
I'm gonna have this body of work, out worldwide and experienced worldwide. And I'm going to bring in, our next project is actually re-editing the Celebrity Archive. Mm-hmm. So like going through the Celebrity Archive, looking for things we might have missed, scanning things we never scanned. So that'll be the next project. I'm in touch with a couple of different photo editors, and we'll go through the archive and see what there is to rescan, and then I think the next book will be a coffee table book of those celebrity portraits.
Oh, that's cool. Really cool, and longing to have it here and show that.
But you have to have so many interesting stories. So do you have any story you can treat us with behind those pictures, maybe some backstage?
Well, most of them are in the book. One of them I used to hang out every time Billy Idol came to town. I'd get a call to come see him at the show, and then we'd hang out doing drugs all night and crazy. And, and one time he was playing at the Casino Club in Nashua, New Hampshire, I think, or Portsmouth, New Hampshire, right on the water. And we were backstage, and he comes running backstage. God damn it. Yo, blah, blah, blah. You're my mate and you can't take pictures all the time. Lifts up a metal milk crate and flings it at my head. The milk crate they put containers of milk in.
Yeah.
But this one was metal, and he flings it at my head and it sticks into the drywall. And I'm like, Billy, what the fuck? And he's like, your girlfriend keeps asking me to take pictures. And I said, Billy, I don't have a girlfriend.
Okay.
And he just goes, oh, and goes into the dressing room, and his manager, very famous manager at the time, Bill Coyne, comes out with a gallon bag of cocaine. Now my heart is out of my chest already. My friend thinking I was trying to push him to do something that had nothing to do with me. But, it was still adrenaline rush to have someone throw a milk crate at your head. And then Bill Coyne comes out and goes, Billy feels really bad. Do you want some cocaine? And it's literally a gallon bag, like not a gallon bag, like with a little bit of that, like a filled gallon bag, like your grandmother would leave you with leftovers, to go home with.
Oh,
okay.
That's a story. So it was most Billy Idol you
we tended to see bands as they came through town. I hung out with the drummers of Adam Ant's band. I've hung out backstage with people, but, I've had certain musicians over my house at the time, like the guys from Adam Ant's band, were over. We were playing records. We were doing lines all night. We were listening to music and drinking. And but Billy was usually the one that I would hang out with. I've had some wild stories through a friend. I was introduced to Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols, who was supposed to get us into backstage to photograph the Clash at Bonds in New York. So we drove down from Boston to New York, and I crashed on a floor with Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols. And the next morning went to Bond. The next day went to Bonds and tried to get in, and then we're hanging out backstage with the Clash. But really, the thing is I was part of the scene also, right? So I dressed the part. I had a lot of friends. If I was backstage and there was a DJ, that I knew the DJ. We were friends. So besides having an assignment, usually, I was part of the scene.
Okay.
It shows in the pictures. They are very personal portraits. Thank you so much, Micheal, and have a really good day in Santa Monica.
Take care of you, and we hope to see you later.
Thank you. I want to thank our audience for listening today. So.